stated this, my other colleagues left, and I stayed at the State House. That marked my encounter and the short period that I have worked with the junta, and I'm quite sure the subsequent questions coming will give clarity to those roles and activities that I undertook since I was told to remain behind.
So when you remained behind, what did Lieutenant Jammeh say to you?
There and then, I was just told to be around, and I was around. And I think until around, maybe around 9 o'clock or so, I was called aside by Second Lieutenant Edward Singate, who had a constructive discussion with me. And during the discussion, he inquired about my background, where I am from, my educational background, and I briefed him accordingly as to those details that he inquired. And he later instructed that I should be issued a military uniform because at this time I was in my police uniform, the white shirt and blue or black trouser, and uniforms were issued to me, the camouflage military uniform.
You mentioned that your conversation with Second Lieutenant Edward Singate occurred around 9 o'clock. Yeah. What time of the day are we talking about? So you were at State House, if I'm not mistaken, between 11 a.m. or noon until 9 o'clock when this happened. Before we talk about your discussion further, can you tell us what you observed during that period, that lengthy period of about 9 hours, essentially? What did you observe at State House?
Similar to the situation that I described at the Fajara Barracks, at the guardhouse, at the guard room. There were also a lot of movement within the State House, soldiers all over the place. But of course, the members of the junta were a little bit secluded, and they had guards surrounding them.
Were you able to gather any information during that period about either what happened in relation to the events the day before, or what was happening on that particular day, meaning the day after the coup?
Not much to write about, but clearly also you could see uncertainty. And probably this alludes to the answer that I provided to one of the commissioners that if there was a serious resistance, perhaps we will not be talking about July 22nd as a successful mutiny that subsequently led to the overthrow of a democratically elected government. The picture I can paint is, it was a little bit chaotic. Chaotic in the sense that even on that Saturday, there was still talk about possibility of foreign intervention, namely from the sister Republic of Senegal, and even there were suggestions that there might be possibility that the American ship or navy that were around for the exercise may intervene. So soldiers were a little bit jittery. I could recall, I think from that Saturday when I went to the State House up to the period that I was arrested, soldiers were in the habit of wearing undershirts under their uniforms. The jacket, they have a t-shirt underneath. And on the trousers, they have jogging pants. Some even have sandals on the side of their pockets, with the sole intention that if there was intervention as they feared, they will quickly get rid of the uniform, remain in the civilian mufti, and blend within the society. So it was evident that things were dicey, and at the material time, and I think up to the time that I was arrested, the military takeover was not in full force and entrenched.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that had action been taken even after the soldiers had taken over the State House, the coup could have been thwarted?
Affirmative, that's my assessment. And I will elaborate more on a suggestion that was even made as it relates to what you have just mentioned.
Indeed. Let's first address the conversation that you had with Second Lieutenant Edward Sinyate around 9 p.m. You mentioned that he asked you about your background and your experience, and you responded. And thereafter, he asked that a military uniform be assigned to you. Is that correct? Did he tell you why or what the junta wanted you to do for them?
My interactions were more with him than any other member of the junta. But of course, I had my interface with Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh as well. And I was appointed secretary to the Provisional Ruling Council, to the junta.
So just to make sure it's clear, when you spoke to Second Lieutenant Edward Sinyate, at that point in time, you were not appointed as secretary to the junta. Is that correct?
No, I wasn't.
Did Second Lieutenant Sinyate explain to you what the junta wanted from you at that time?
The rule was clear that being the secretary means I should be taking notes and covering all meetings and briefings that took place at the material time.
So when exactly were you appointed as secretary to the junta?
On that Saturday, late in the evening.
Who appointed you to that position?
To the best of my recollection, the pronouncement came from Edward Sinyate, second lieutenant.
Do you know if he consulted anyone before appointing you to that position?
If there was no tacit agreement, most importantly from Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh, Second Lieutenant Edward Singate would not have made that pronouncement. As at this point, there was already a degree or modicum of leadership within the junta, and he was the de facto leader.
And are you basing that also on the fact that it was Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh who asked you to remain behind, and subsequently Second Lieutenant Edward Singate spoke to you?
Affirmative. And I may also highlight the fact that it is interesting to note that I'm not saying this is by any means or indication of disunity or lack of cohesiveness, but it was evidently clear that Second Lieutenant Edward Singate was more affiliated with Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh, and it was also evident that Second Lieutenant Sana Sabali and Second Lieutenant Sadibu Hydra were always together, similar to Edward and Yaya being always together. And they were more prominent and present at the State House, unlike Sana Sabali and Hydra, who were all and about doing oversight and networking outside the seat of power, which was the State House.
After your conversation with Lieutenant Singate that evening, did anything else happen that night?
Not anything significant to mention, but I know that the next day, which was the Sunday, I was given an office. I was using the studio of the former president, Sir Dawda Jawara, and at this time there were only two people who had offices at the State House. Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh, who was using one of the bedrooms as his office with guards positioned outside. Again, this is a testimony or further qualify the fact that he was the de facto leader. And I was using the studio as my office.
What about the other members of the junta?
Edward was ever present at the State House, but like I have said, Sana Sabali and Sadibu Hydra were dipping in and dipping out. They were more perambulating outside, going about places than being constantly present at the State House. Additionally also, at this time too, there was a congregation of senior officers also present. And aside of the fact that I had an office, which was the studio of the former president, we were also using the main sitting room in the State House as a rendezvous point. And during this period also, Major Antuman Saho, Captain Mamad Cham, Captain Samsudin Sar, and Major Malik Njai were ever present. But yes, let me also mention a significant development also on that Saturday. I also recall now that there were two officers who crossed from Farafenye and were present at the State House. Captain Sam Jiba and Second Lieutenant Yankuba Ture. They came to the State House, and I could vividly recall them being told to return back to Farafenye rather than being present in Banjul when they have work that they were supposed to do at Farafenye. It transpired that subsequently, Captain Sam Jiba went back, but Second Lieutenant Yankuba Ture stayed behind. But it was also apparent that at this point, he was nobody. What do I mean by he was nobody? It was very clear that he was not associated with the junta for the mere fact that he was told to go back to his duty station or command area. But I later came to know and understand that because of personal intervention from Edward Singate, he managed to remain at the State House, which subsequently culminated to him even having a cabinet position.
So focusing on the Saturday when Second Lieutenant Yankuba Ture arrived, as well as Sam Jiba, do you recall what time they arrived at State House? What time of the day?
No. I cannot recall the timings.
You said that they were told that they should be back in Farafenye, continuing with their duties. Do you recall who told them that?
Second Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh.
Do you recall anything else about that conversation?
No, it was very simple that at that material time, if he gives those orders, they are as good as to be carried out, or your fate will be decided.
So at some point, it transpired that Sam Jiba went back, but Second Lieutenant Yankuba Ture stayed at the State House.
Native.
So let's move into the Sunday. You told us that you were appointed secretary to the junta, and you commenced your duties. How long did you stay as secretary to the junta?
From Sunday, and I think up to Wednesday before I was arrested.
So I want to focus on that period between Sunday and Wednesday. Can you explain to us what your role was?
As I highlighted earlier, the scope of work that I undertook entails covering the meetings that took place at the State House during that period. And there were a series of meetings that took place with diplomatic representatives accredited to the Gambia at the time. And this includes the U.S. Embassy, the British High Commission, Sierra Leone, Senegal, Nigeria, the ambassadors that were around. I think we had one or two or three meetings with them at the time. And I covered all those meetings.
Can we focus on those meetings, the diplomatic meetings? What was the content of the meetings? What were the discussions about?
It was in two folds. I am of the view that the junta wanted to present their case as to why what happened. And during those meetings, it was Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh who was doing the talking, who highlighted the fact that the coup was as a result of the endemic corruption that was associated with the former regime, the PPP regime. Now again, whether this is a perception or is perceived, that's another thing, but in his narration and narrative during this meeting was that the government was redundant, full of corruption, and to the extent that they are cultivating a mechanism of dynasty. Those in the power and leadership were sending their children to good schools abroad, when the average Gambian is not opportune or facilitated or capacitated to benefit from such. And the whole idea was that the idea was for their kids, or children rather, to go abroad to good universities, studies, and come and replace them to perpetuate that aspect of the dynasty that I talked about. And I recall on the issue of the corruption, it was not a wholesale issue that it was brought by members of the representative of these countries who were present, particularly the US Embassy, because they disagree with the manner in which the issue of corruption was being described. The picture that Yaya Jammeh painted at the time was as if government officials travel to, let's say, country X, go there, they are given funds in the briefcase, and they just siphon the money. Unlike the conventional way of loans and grants, the manner in which they are disbursed through corporate processes, rather than just perhaps fly into country X and you are given a briefcase and then you steal the money. Probably at that time also, this is indicative of their level of understanding of governance, of running a country, of financial processes and instructions and the like. And again, you may not be in a position also to blame them. And the reason why I said one may not be in a position to blame them was it was evident today, it will be evident tomorrow, it will be evident up to posterity that the military institution or the security services are not cut out in terms of the training, the wherewithal, the resources and the tools to run a country. It's evident. I wanted to intercede to explain further what Lieutenant Yahya Jammeh was trying to convey. And then again, I raised my hand. This is the third time I'm raising my hand, and my hand has always put me in trouble. This is why now I try as much as possible not to be raising my hand, because it brought me 3 troubles in my life. I remember he swiped on the chair and said, "Yes, Jeng." I said, I think I understand the position of the ambassador, what he was trying to say. He cut me rudely and abruptly and said, "Jeng, don't ever talk when I talk," meaning that I should know my place. And obviously I knew my place. I kept quiet and continued with perhaps what I was responsible and supposed to do, that was to take minutes and notes. But I have indicated how unprepared the mutineers were, and had it been that there was semblance of resistance, this issue would have been ended there and then. And I've also painted the level of awareness, capacity of members of the junta at the time. I could boldly say that they might have been trained and good to do the work that they were trained to do, which is soldiering, but the art of governance and running a state, they were far removed from that, as evident of what I saw. And to the extent that even you stage a coup, you don't know the basic fact and rule that you needed to communicate to your people as a country.
So you mentioned that Lieutenant Jammeh basically explained the rationale for the coup from his perspective. Did he provide any other information, or did he give any kind of undertaking during these diplomatic meetings?
I also recall that there were suggestions from members of the diplomatic mission who were suggesting that it is not too late for the junta to hand over power and go back to the barracks. And there was the possibility that nothing will befall them in terms of persecution or prosecution. I recall this being mentioned, but this was flatly rejected by the junta.
Apart from Lieutenant Jammeh, did any other member of the junta speak during that meeting?
I want to believe that Edward also spoke, and it was also very clear that most of the time, he was relied upon in terms of dialogue and speech, because he was fortunate to be born in the United Kingdom. He was more eloquent in terms of the English language. And if you sincerely ask me, based on my interface and interaction with the junta members, he was more level-headed than the rest. That's my personal assessment.
Level-headed in what sense?
In terms of knowledge, understanding, and the usage of the English language.
So apart from these diplomatic meetings that we've talked about, were you present at any other meetings that the members of the junta had during your time as secretary?
The senior officers that were also present at the State House, time to time have interface with the junta. And I recall that Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh was habitual of constantly reminding these senior officers, to the extent that this became a mantra, that monkey will not walk and baboon chop.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Hello?
Can you repeat that?
He was habitual of reminding the senior GNA officers present at the State House that monkey will not walk and baboon chop. In other words, what he was saying was that they, the young officers, will not come this far and allow the senior officers to hijack what they were able to achieve.
And who were the senior officers that you're referring to? You mentioned some names in the beginning, and I just want to have clarity on
The
that.
faces that were prominent at the State House at that time was Major Antuman Saho, Major Malik Jai, Captain Samsidin Sar, and Captain Mamad Cham.
During your time as secretary to the junta, was the issue of transition discussed?
The issue of transition was discussed, but not with the junta members. But if you recall, I told you that there was a forum, and the fora was that at the main sitting room, these senior officers and other officers who were at the State House used to have lively discussions as to what is the best way to ensure governance in the country in light of what has already happened. And there were sincere discussions. Sincere, I mean sincere, that what would be best and applicable is a transitional period of either 6 months or 1 year. But perhaps we were very naive when we were discussing these issues, because again, who are we, or who were we, with reference even to monkey walk, baboon chop, to be sitting at the State House main sitting room talking about transitional period when we don't even know what was the mind and the way forward that the junta has already charted for themselves. So it was naive on our part. But I guess what underlied all this was the sincerity that surrounded this discussion, and it was a genuine assessment and a consideration that there was need for transitional arrangements.
So this was a discussion between senior members of the military and yourself and some other individuals, but not including any member of the junta. Is that right?
Affirmative. And at this time also, you may recall that I have indicated that Second Lieutenant Yankuba Ture was told to return to Farafenye with Katem Sanjiba, but he managed to find his way to remain at the State House. These discussions that were taking place, as I've indicated, there was no presence of any of the core members of the junta. But Yankuba was interfacing with us, and later there was a belief that whatever discussion that had transpired, he was the conveyor or conduit of going back to report or mention this thing to the rest of the junta members.
So we're still focused on your time as secretary to the junta, and we're specifically looking at the events of Sunday to Wednesday. Were you present at the meeting where members of the junta were appointed members of council?
No. I only get to know that there was even a list of council members. And how I get to know about this is that I recall Second Lieutenant Sana Sabali storming the State House. He found us sitting at the usual sitting room. And
Sorry, do you recall what day that was?
this should be Sunday. And the timing I forgot as well, but I could recall him uttering these words: "You guys are crazy. You are forming a cabinet or council membership in my absence." But then I think it suddenly dawned on him that we were even nobody. He said, "I should not even be talking to you about this." He just walked and went to meet with Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh. What later transpired, I don't know. But his demeanor and countenance changed after that discussions. But the information that I collated or gathered at that point was that Yaya Jammeh was the chairman of the Provisional Ruling Council. Second Lieutenant Sana Sabali was the deputy. Edward, Minister of Defense. Haidara was made Minister of Interior. Yankuba Ture, Minister of Lands. Captain Samsidin Sar, Trade and Industry, and Captain Mamad Cham, I think Tourism. And then Major Malik Jai was not given a ministerial position, but was requested to look after the health sector. This is what I can recall. But I think also on that Sunday, or was it Monday, again, my recollections of dates and events, the representation of the council was supposed to be broadened, and they earmarked some civilians that they also wanted to call up into the council. And then again, this comes back to the pronouncement and the mantra of Yahya Jammeh that monkey will not walk, baboon chop. The senior officers that were at the State House were given this task to consult with these individuals that were identified as potential council members. And when they were on and about on this task, I was part of them also in meeting with these civilians that were identified for council or cabinet portfolios.
I will come back to those meetings shortly. On the issue of appointments, do you recall any individuals who were considered for appointments but not given appointments?
I was not informed by a council member, but I overheard that Superintendent Suare was initially earmarked for a cabinet position, but there was disagreement among some of the junta members that he should not be given a council portfolio. For what reasons, who, and why, eludes me. I don't have further information on that.
Are you aware of which council position he was being considered for? Which cabinet position?
I initially had, I don't know, even there was proposal for Minister of Interior. I also had that as a result of him not being given the cabinet position, that gave room for Yankuba Toure to step in and became Minister for Local Government, based on the information that I gathered. So in other words, the initial position that was earmarked for him, being local government, was later assumed by Yankuba Toure.
Now, coming to the meetings that took place between some of the senior soldiers who were then appointed members of the council, you mentioned that there were discussions that took place with persons earmarked for consideration of certain cabinet positions. Can you tell us about that?
The list is as follows. Honorable Halifa Saleh, Samsar of PDOI, Amina Fall Sonko, Member Tambedu, and Anti Satangjao. If my memory serves me well, and also there was a key institution that also needed leadership immediately, and that was the directorship of the National Intelligence, and Mr. Sambaba was identified for that, and we went round also to inform him of this proposal.
Can you tell us a little bit about those discussions? What were the reactions of these individuals towards these proposals?
The feedback from Honorable Halifa Saleh and Samuel Sarr was explicit. There and then they categorically informed us that they cannot take part, and neither can they be associated with a military coup, So they are not in any position whatsoever to accept these positions, but they are citizens of this country. They may be able to support in any way they can. So they flatly rejected the proposals. However, it was unlike the other people, and again, best reasons known to them, and again, this is their country. Amina Fall Sonko, Anti Satanjao, and Member Tambedu, and Mr. Sambaba all accepted the proposals.
Coming back to your suggestion to the junta to make an announcement to the people of the Gambia to inform them of what had taken place, do you know if that occurred and who made the announcement?
I know that on July 22nd itself, there was a scanty pronouncement from Captain Sonko, not well structured, who was the first individual to announce the coup. But then a proper text was drafted, prepared. In the lead was Samsidin Sarr, and there were inputs from myself and Captain Cham. And I don't know whether now at this time it was Yaya Jammeh who made the that speech. But I'm a little bit lost, but I know that a well-structured and codified statement or press release was prepared in this regard.
So you told us that you served as secretary to the junta from essentially the Sunday to the Wednesday. What led to termination of your post?
Now, bearing in mind that I went to State House on Saturday, up until Tuesday, I took permission directly from Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh that I needed to go home to see my parents and family members because I was absent since Saturday. And you may recall that at this time also, facility of cell phone and access to telephone and social media to contact your family was rare, if not totally absent. So I was in Comunicado. So I took permission to go home at least to reassure my family, but particularly my parents, that I was still alive, and the request was granted. So I went home on Sunday, on Tuesday, and I was made to report back to the State House on Wednesday morning, which I did.
Sorry, when did you leave on Tuesday? When did you leave the State House?
Late in the evening. Late in the evening. And when I returned to State House on Wednesday, this should be around 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock. I think around 10 o'clock, Edward found me in the studio. I was working as my office, and indicated to me that he would like me to finalize all the reports and briefing notes that I was working on, because there was a scheduled cabinet meeting that afternoon, and the report would be useful during the cabinet discussion. At this time, again, I did not have a computer, so I was virtually and literally taking these notes were handwritten, and I have scarf of full scarf papers that I was writing on. But I decided to settle down and ensure that I clearly prepare these reports, because when you cover these meetings, shorthand, written, and all whatnot, the idea was that we were going to a specific lady, I forgot the name by now, who was working at the Ministry of Justice to help us type these things before the cabinet meeting. And I embarked on focusing to finalize these reports, as was outlined by Edward.
So what happened next?
Now, as I was working on these reports, suddenly somebody knocked the door, and I said, "Come in." And there was a soldier who told me that I was required to report downstairs. I immediately left whatever that I was doing, closed the door behind me, and as I was about to descend the stairs to go down, and apparently when I was going down, I saw about 4 vehicles standing like in a convoy. There were soldiers standing out. They were all fully armed and all whatnot. As I was about to descend the last steps, there was an order that I should raise my hands up. I did, and there was a pronouncement by who, I don't know, that I was under arrest. And I was instructed to board the vehicle that was in the middle with 2 escorts at the back and 2 in front lead vehicles. And the door was open, it was ajar, and as I was about to enter the vehicle, I had my name, Jeng, and I turned around, and it happens to be Sabali standing at top of the stairs, and he said to me, "Come." There was false hope, because I said, yeah, maybe this must be an error. If Sabali is calling me back, maybe it's a mistaken identity. And the reason why I was thinking like this was, I did not remember or recall doing anything wrong. But, of course, I had got feelings that things were not right that morning, for the mere fact that, but I could not pursue to find out more, because the task at hand was engrossing in itself, that I needed to finish the work that I was doing for this cabinet meeting. But usually you will see and come across other colleagues there, but I did not see Samsidin Sar. I did not see Mamad Cham. I did not see Major Malik Njai. Not knowing that some of them were arrested in that evening or early morning before my arrival at the State House. But I only happened to know this after the fact, when we were all incarcerated and the discussions took place in the Slama. Anyway, going back to the call from Sabali, I ascended the stairs and went, and he pointed to me that we should go to the studio where I was working. We entered, and he said to me to surrender all the documents that I was working on and my firearm. You know, when I was called to report downstairs, in order to maintain confidentiality, I had a drawer, so I had opened it and put all the documents there. And my sidearm, the pistol that I was armed with, was also inside the drawer. So I pulled the drawer, handed all the papers to him, and he also requested my firearm. I also pulled out the firearm, and at this stage, it was in a holster. very nice and beautiful holster that was a gift from a colleague, ASP Buba Jame, who was killed during November 11, presented it to me on his return from training in Turkey. So Sabali pulled the pistol out of the holster, cleared it and removed the magazine, and then was about to put the pistol back into the holster when I indicated to him that, well, you are taking the pistol, but the holster is mine. This is a gift from a friend that I cherish. He said to me, Jang, you may not need this holster for the rest of your life. He gave directive to the soldiers that were there that I should be taken to Yundum.
At that point, what was going through your mind while all of this was going on?
Well, that this was the end, and it concludes my chapter of the short spell and work that I was engaged with the junta. But I was still of the view at this time that going to Yundum might clarify things. That at least I know going to Yundum had required that I will be interrogated, questioned, and I had no skeleton in the cupboard. I was going to be subsequently exonerated for anything. Eh? So I boarded the vehicle, and they were driving to Banjul, to Yundum. I think before we reach Denton Bridge, or immediately after we descended the bridge, at this time, the escort or the convoy of vehicles that were transporting me to Yundum, the individual that was in charge of this was Warrant Officer Alpha Ba. I think he was equally summarily executed along with ASP Lamin Jaju for the alleged involvement in the Katong attack or so. But he was in the same vehicle that I was in, including a non-commissioned officer called Baba Imane. As we were going, I suddenly heard from Baba Imane that, okay, in fact, you should give us back our uniform. You are not originally a military officer. You should not wear our uniform. I attempted to remove the jacket to hand it over to him because since I was a kid, I always wear undervest. That was part of my growing up. But on a second thought, I responded to him that he should be out of his mind if he, as a non-commissioned officer, would make an officer undress before him. I said, I'm not going to do it. Then Warrant Officer Alpha Ba intervened and said, I have a point as an officer that I shouldn't be undressed, and he squarely put it to Baba Imane that that was out of order and out of line. And at this point, Baba said, but, you know, these people don't deserve this, because they thought that they, the Wolof boys, will be able to make a counter coup. They must be mad, because we will all die before that can happen. What he meant by the Wolof boys, I didn't know. And he refused to elaborate further. But I now came to understand later that this Wolof boy reference was ascribed to myself, Samsidin Sar, Mamad Cham, and Major Malik Jai, who were arrested on the same day, and they were all, my understanding, characterized as Wall of Boys. I subsequently requested that if it is only the uniform that they want back, my residence is a Latil Kunda Jama. The convoy can pass through my residence. I will gladly remove the uniform, get into civilian dress, and hand them over the uniform, and we go to Yundum. I think this was a compromise agreed upon. And from Banjul, Westfield, the branch, Latil Kunda, and to my residence. I remember when they got, when we were entering the neighborhood of the residence, I was informed by Warrant Officer Alphaba that I should not be stupid to do anything. And this was in reference to any attempt to escape, because I'll be gone down if I do that. It's as simple as I should go in, change, and come out. And escort was provided. Now I recall also when I got off the vehicle, my compound was surrounded. I went with a couple of soldiers inside, went in on chain. But this episode caused pandemonium, because the whole neighborhood, men, women, children, the old, the elderly, all came out. Some were even crying, soliciting and appealing to the junta, to the security personnel to let me go. But of course, this was just a dream. But the side of the neighbors crying, pleading, moved me a lot, and but there was not much that they could do. Eventually, I changed into my civilian clothes, handed over the uniform, and we drove straight to Yundum.
Sorry, can I just stop you there? We'll come back to what happened at Yundum Barracks after the break. I'll just cede the floor to the commissioners to ask any questions.
Thank you very much, Emma Council, and thank you very much, Emma, Mr. Jane. Two quick questions before I ask the commissioners if they have any points they would want to raise with you. I think the first one is very clear. When you left State House, the 4 critical days that you were there, Sunday through Wednesday, you left State House, went to your home on Tuesday, you said. Did you go with any of the contemporaneous notes that you had with you? I just want to know the fate of those notes, not what you handed over to Savali on Wednesday, but did anything happen to those notes that you had?
Yes, sir. I had rough draft and sketch of some of these notes that were also in my custody and possession at home.
Do you still have them?
No, because they were confiscated when a panel was instituted, and I was going to subsequently come to that, because this was, again, a second visit where I was again provided an escort, and the same scenario repeated itself, that ugly scenario, escort back to my residence to lay hand on that briefcase. I will dilate more on that as we proceed, Chair. Unless you want me to...
No, not at all. I would not want to preempt the legal team. We'll come to that. The second question is a lot easier. During those 4 days at State House, were there any attempts to establish contact with the former president and his team in Dakar? Perhaps not directly with the junta, but perhaps through intermediaries. You were meeting with some diplomatic representatives, you said, during that period. Were there any indications of contacts being established between Jawara and his team in Dakar and the junta here in Banjul?
Indeed, there was, but I may not be in a position to specifically mention the discussion that took place, but I know that contact was established, and from what I understood, it was even Edward who was the one interfacing in these discussions. But yes, contact was made with the former members of the PPP regime, yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Commissioners, Commissioner Kinte? Okay, I'll come. Yes, indeed. Go ahead.
Commissioner Kinte, in your explanations, you said that you observed soldiers had double dresses. If it had not been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you were very observant. Don't you think you were under close surveillance and it was detected that you were too observant, which was a threat, and may have led to whatever subsequences you have encountered?
I cannot confirm this affirmatively, but if I did not also consider that I was under surveillance or being observed remotely, then I would consider myself the biggest fool on this planet. The reason why I state this is that, number one, everything that happened with me in terms of the short period that I worked with the junta was accidental. Number two, perhaps also my perception and orientation might have even been intimidating to some in terms of what I believe and what I say. And I could comfortably say that I might not have been 100% trusted with regards to my presence at the State House and my work with them. But it was not all that obvious on pronouns. But of course, I know that I was being looked at with good lenses, and my activities were being observed. If that answers, Councillor.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'll take the commissioners on the right first and then come back on my left. Bishop, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner James Odeko. Mr. Abubakar Jeng, you, in your description, you said you were in the State House from Saturday to Tuesday. Will it be correct to say that the members of the junta and those officers that were in the State House, that you worked 24/7 throughout that period?
Can you repeat, please?
You narrated that you were at the State House from Saturday to Tuesday, from which you took permission to go home. So it means you were in the State House Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So what I want to know is that whether it would be right to say that members of the junta and you, the officers that were with them, were working 24/7.
Affirmative. We were working 24/7, and our lunch, dinner, and even breakfast was served at the State House, and it was coming from Atlantic Hotel. So, affirmative, yes, we were there 24/7.
Thank you. Commissioner Carr.
Commissioner Carr, I have two questions. The first is you described Edward as the most level-headed person among the junta leaders. Did you observe notorious behavior from the junta leaders as a whole? That's my first question. The second is, how pervasive was corruption within the force, within the police force?
How?
Pervasive. How common was corruption in the police?
At this point, I did not see any aggression or aggressiveness from any member of the junta. But of course, it was evident that each of them have their personalities, and from time to time, it was manifested. What do I mean by that? Lieutenant Yaya Jammeh, by nature and by design and makeup, is cocky and arrogant. Edward, very composed, and it's your guess as to what is in his mind. Sana Sabali, very much impatient, and also very economical in terms of engagement and interaction. Sadibu Haidara looks sober, but the best description that would fit him is he portrays himself as very docile. I see him more as a follower than a leader. And again, when you say members of the junta, is this post factor when council members were announced that I need to include Yankuba Toure, or you are talking about the core original junta members? Yankuba Toure, I know there was someone who characterized him as a clown, but I may not go as far as painting that picture, but I know he's a funny person. And again, this is a personal assessment and judgment that he doesn't have beliefs or conviction. He flows with the tide. I don't know whether this gives you a picture of what the objective of your question was. Huh? Yeah.
On corruption in the force.
Corruption is multifaceted. It is not when you have a case to investigate, you abdicate your responsibilities and take money under the table. That's corruption. You are a senior manager within the police. You were tasked to be part of a promotion board, and you do not ensure due diligence in terms of the manner in which candidates are properly nominated for corruption, for promotion. If due diligence is not undertaken, I describe that as corruption. Corruption is, to me, when the government gives a vote to the police, which is meant to buy logistics and equipment, be it uniforms and all whatnot, and those in the leadership of the police decide not to use that money and divert it to other use. Now, 1993 up to 1994, before the advent of the coup, I cannot vouch that there was no corruption in the police, but it was measured. Measured in terms of, you cannot even draw a parallel or comparison of what we saw from 1994 to before the advent of this current republic. So yes, based on the description that I give you relative to my general characterization and understanding of corruption, I would not rule out that there wasn't corruption in the police at the time, but there was a dynamic leadership, management that was working towards in ensuring that there is adequate security service delivery in this country, unlike what followed. And I think we will dilate on that as we proceed. I don't know whether this also answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
He left the police headquarters to the Marine unit, where the former president and some other cabinet ministers and officials, the composition I don't know, but that's where they went to join the ship. He went there to brief them of developments. But as he was getting there, the ship was almost about to sail. When he entered into the ship, it sailed along with him, and he was even isolated inside the ship because I think the first accusation to him was that, we understand that you were part of the coup, which was not the case. And he had to explain to them that he was not part of it. And then again, this is information that I gathered from him. And the manner in which he was received and treated in the ship resulted that when they got to Dakar, he knew that he had no place there, and that is how he decided to come back to the Gambia. As far as the scheduled training is concerned, honestly, I had no clue of how it was structured and how it went. I don't know whether, Council, is it possible that I just use the restroom quickly?
Oh, yes, please, please. Go ahead. Yeah, but I just want to know if Commissioners. Before he comes back, any of the Commissioners, if you have questions, we'll wait, otherwise we can take a break.
Yeah.
No questions on that side. Okay, if you don't have any questions, Council, if you don't have any, we can adjourn the meeting, come back in an hour's time. Instead of 2:30, we come 2:45. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.